Praise be Jesus and Mary. Today we're going to continue our reflections on the commandments of God. We're reflecting on the fifth commandment, which is you shall not kill. Specifically today we're going to reflect on this regarding euthanasia and suicide. Euthanasia is a Greek word. It means a good or happy death. Eu, which is good in Greek, and plus thanatos, which is death. So the ancient pagans thought that of euthanasia, they thought of it as a merciful way to put someone to death. Modern pagans tend to think of it the same way as well. What do Christians say when we think of a happy death or a good death? Well, for us, a happy death or a good death means dying in God's grace. So it's not the absence of suffering, it's really the presence of God's grace in our souls that counts when we die. Euthanasia itself is a grave sin against the fifth commandment. Whatever its motive and means, says the Catechism at paragraph 2277, whatever its motive and means, direct euthanasia consists in putting an end to the lives of the handicapped, sick, or dying persons. It is morally unacceptable, says the Catechism. So we know that God calls us to alleviate suffering and to preserve life, not to take life. So life is in His hands, right? And He wants us to leave it there. Don't take life into our own hands. Leave it in the hands of the Lord regarding people's deaths. The same paragraph says in paragraph 2277, an act or omission which of itself or by intention causes death in order to eliminate suffering constitutes a murder, gravely contrary to the dignity of the human person and to the respect due to the living God, His Creator. Unquote. Again, some people think that they're performing an act of mercy with assisted suicide, but it's not mercy. It is murder in God's eyes. So someone who has a poor spiritual or moral formation objectively commits mortal sin by choosing to be euthanized or by assisting in it, but subjectively speaking, their culpability might be diminished, again, because of ignorance. The person who's euthanized against their will obviously commits no sin regarding that matter. Regarding terminally ill people, the Catechism says at paragraph 2278, discontinuing medical procedures that are burdensome, dangerous, extraordinary, or disproportionate to the expected outcome can be legitimate. It is the refusal of overzealous treatment. Here one does not will to cause death. One's inability to impede it is merely accepted, unquote. So ordinary care is required for those who are ill, not necessarily extraordinary care. I think that's common sense for the most part. There are a number of things we could look at with each case, but we won't delve into individual case studies with terminally ill people here. One of the remedies we need to offer those who are considering euthanasia is to teach them the value of suffering from a spiritual point of view. We've spoken on that a number of times here. One suggestion would even be to read Pope John Paul II's apostolic letter, Salvifici Dolores, which means the value of human suffering, or read it with even someone who's considering ending their life in that way. For a Christian, suffering is not wasted. Suffering is a share in the redeeming work of Christ. It's actually a share in His own passion. If we suffer with Christ, we'll also be glorified with Him. That's what the apostle says in Romans 8:17. So we need to see our suffering in the light of Jesus' suffering, in the light of His suffering for us. The second thing we'll speak on today is suicide. Just as God frowns upon euthanasia, so too He frowns upon suicide. We are stewards, not owners, of the life that God has entrusted to us. It's not ours to dispose of as we like. Like euthanasia, suicide is a sin against the fifth commandment. The Catechism at paragraph 2281 says suicide contradicts the natural inclination of the human being to preserve and perpetuate his life. It is gravely contrary to the just love of self. It likewise offends love of neighbor because it unjustly breaks the ties of solidarity with family, nation, and other human societies to which we continue to have obligations. Suicide is contrary to love for the living God. unquote, says the Catechism. It's also a serious sin to voluntarily cooperate or assist in someone's suicide as well. The moral culpability of people who die this way isn't easy to accept, to understand or assess. The Catechism says at paragraph 2282, grave psychological disturbances, anguish, or grave fear or hardship, suffering, or torture can diminish the responsibility of the one committing suicide. And the next paragraph adds this. It says, we should not despair of the eternal salvation of persons who have taken their own lives. By ways known to Him alone, God can provide the opportunity for salutary repentance. The Church prays for persons who have taken their own lives, unquote. So there's still hope for the salvation of people who die of suicide, but we do need to pray for them. A good part of their hope is tied up in our prayers for them. So we'll close today's reflection with a few counseling tips on suicide prevention from a Christian counselor, June Hunt. She has a very good little handout, little booklet on suicide prevention if you're interested with that. With suicide, it is important to bring any dark thoughts that you have into the light. It's the first step, actually, towards healing. It's sharing the secret, telling someone about what you're wrestling with. People contemplating suicide need you to talk to them because they don't feel connected. They don't feel like they have any hope, really. Most of them don't really want to die. They just want to have the pain that they're experiencing to stop. Having someone for them to talk to is really a powerful preventative. In general, suicide risks decrease as social interactions increase. Suicide itself is a secondary response to a deeper problem. So you need to know the deeper problem. And they need to learn, the people who are wrestling with it need to learn how to handle their deeper problems in a healthier way. Examples of those deeper problems that people contemplating suicide, or they wrestle with maybe an excessive loss that they've experienced, or social isolation, or critical illness or impairment, or an abusive background, or psychological disorders, or excessive guilt. Even untreated depression can actually lead to suicide. Usually, suicide's not done on impulse. Usually there's a long process of destructive thinking and clouded conclusions which lead to a denial of truth and a disconnection with people. A common thought that someone who's considering suicide has is that no one understands them. No one understands me. No one feels the way that I do. So they really do need someone to talk to again. People contemplating suicide need to know how to manage their emotional pain. They need to learn to manage their impulsive reactions as well. And they need also to not focus on feelings of despair. And they need to reach out to others too. So talk with them. That's a very helpful preventative. It's very helpful even to ask them, what's been so painful in your life that you don't want to live anymore. And when talking with them, don't first counter or correct their statements. First connect with them. It's much more important. More important to establish the connection than to make the correction with them. Because if they feel that you care, that's a big, important step in the right direction. That's huge if they feel that you care about them. You can just ask them questions, and whatever they say, you repeat it back to them. That shows that you're listening, shows that you actually care for them. Some other good questions to ask are, are you thinking of harming yourself? Why are you feeling suicidal? How long have you been thinking about taking your life? Have you spoken to this about anyone? Do you have a plan? How is it that you would harm yourself? Are you implementing that plan right now? Have you written a suicide note? It's very important if the note has been written. That's a sign that they've taken a step really in the wrong direction there. Also ask, has there ever been anyone in your family who's taken their lives as well? Sometimes it feels like it gives them permission to do that if someone else in the family has committed suicide. You can ask them also in terms of lives you'd be leaving behind. If you did choose to take your life, what would it look like for them 5 or 10 years from now? What would it look like for those people? Many times people who are suicidal, they're only thinking of the immediate moment. So you want to try to pull them out of the immediate. Also, you can ask them right now, how does it feel to be you? Very simple. And just repeat back to them what they say as well. Ask and listen. That's a huge, huge incentive for people who struggle with living. Ask and listen to them. Identify with their pain. Express concern for them. You may be one of God's lifesavers for them. You may be the lifesaver that God has thrown to that person or to those people. So let's ask Our Lady today to pray especially for those who are considering taking their life in any way, shape, or form, that God's grace would open their mind and their heart to the love of the Lord, which brings hope and healing to the suffering and to the hopeless. Praise be Jesus and Mary, now and forever.